Revealed, how a cleaning lady's incredible secret notes transformed a millionaire's life in 30 days. Sarah Bennett's hands trembled slightly as she dusted the ornate shelves of Tom Bennett's mansion, but it wasn't merely the act of cleaning that made her uneasy. In a world where the lawns were perfectly manicured and the interiors glittered with opulence, she often felt invisible. She was a cleaning lady navigating the gilded cage of a self-made millionaire, a man whose ambition was as fierce as it was relentless. Every morning began with the dread of being a part of someone else's success story while burying her own dreams beneath layers of dust and clutter. While organizing the library filled with books that seemed to whisper the accomplishments of Tom's past, she discovered forgotten correspondences that revealed the man behind the power. The struggles etched in the yellowed paper resonated with her own upbringing, tugging at her heart with an urgency she hadn't expected. Here, among the whispers of betrayals and sacrifices, he was just a man, not the untouchable figure everyone in Willow Creek revered. For the first time, their lives felt inexplicably intertwined, and she felt a flicker of passion to write her thoughts in the margins, insights drawn from her own life where love and family mattered most. Each note left behind demanded remorse and reflection. But with every word, Sarah's own voice echoed with fear of judgment, of relevance in a world where she was meant to remain faceless, just the silent adapter of someone else's legacy. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she observed Tom reading her notes, a knot of anxiety twisted tighter in her stomach. How would he react? Would he cast her thoughts aside like the discarded letters? It was maddening, the way vulnerability poured out of her pen, each written word a confession of her own sacrifices and quiet longings. But what if he found them trivial, a mere distraction from his empire? The pressure mounted. She was stepping onto a precipice she never intended to tread. The days passed, and Sarah watched Tom change before her eyes, engaging with his past through her notes, yet doubt clouded her heart. She sensed the internal battle waging in him, a man trapped in his own design. But who was she to influence a stranger whose wealth was beyond her comprehension? Would she be the catalyst for his redemption or merely a footnote in his journey? As Tom struggled to connect with his estranged daughter, each failed attempt felt like a blow to Sarah's own heart. Mingling her hope with anguish, she ached for both their healing journeys, yet couldn't shake the bone-deep sensation that she might just be the ghost haunting their futures. Her breath caught when she accidentally tucked away a particularly raw note, revealing her dreams, a hidden part of herself that exposed her vulnerability. Had she gone too far? The thought sent an icy shiver coursing through her, and she froze in the mansion's stillness, bracing herself for the consequence of her daring. Would Tom understand? Would any of this matter when he faced the bitter remnants of his past? The air thickened with uncertainty as reality stalked her steps, teasing the fragile threads that bonded their lives. Could one cleaning lady's courage turn the tide for a man lost in his wealth, or would the walls of privilege simply swallow her dreams whole? Days began to blur into one another, each marked by a blend of hope and apprehension. Sarah felt the weight of her words linger in the air of the mansion. The tension simmered as Tom delved deeper into the revelations she had unknowingly shared. Despite her trepidation, a sliver of pride peeked through the fog of insecurity. Perhaps her thoughts were not as trivial as she had feared. Each morning, she wrestled with the growing desire to express herself more freely. Yet, every time she reached for her pen, doubt gripped her tightly. Tom was becoming more engaged, not just with the notes but waking up from a slumber of indifference. She could see the small changes, the corners of his mouth lifting faintly when he read her insights, or the quiet intensity in his gaze as he contemplated the reflections written between the lines. And yet, as he transformed, Sarah felt her own identity shifting. Where did this leave her? The fragile nature of their connection thrived in the space between her vulnerable words and his unfolding story. Did he even recognize the influence she was having on him? One afternoon, while organizing the kitchen, Sarah's thoughts strayed back to her dreams, an old relic of inspiration buried under years of practicality. The ambition that fueled her youth seemed like an apparition now, fogged by the routines dictated by the wealthy around her. As she scrubbed stubborn stains off the countertop, frustration flared within her. Why had she allowed herself to step into the shadows for so long? The butterflies in her stomach pushed her to confront herself in the reflection of the stainless steel refrigerator. She was not just a cleaning lady. She was a woman with thoughts worth sharing, ideas roaming unarticulated. The battle between her desires and her role in the mansion was a knife cutting through her resolve. What would happen if she took a leap, allowed herself to be seen? Deciding it was time to unveil her own story, she began weaving snippets of her life experiences alongside her notes to Tom. This time, her pen didn't hesitate. She wrote about her younger self dancing in her small room, dreaming of stages and city lights. She poured out her struggles with familial expectations, the weight of what-ifs choking her ambitions. The act felt cathartic, an unraveling of years of enforced silence, but even in this newfound freedom, an unsettling thought lingered: what if those snippets brought the weight of her truths crashing down on them both? This was a risk far greater than the mere act of confiding her heart. What if Tom saw her as pompous for daring to compare their lives, especially after he had opened himself so deeply to her? As Sarah put the finishing touches on her most revealing note, she took a deep breath, staring at her messy handwriting. She was erecting walls and bridges at the same time, a poignant reflection of her internal conflicts. This was personal development sparked by vulnerability. Later that day, as twilight crept into the mansion, Sarah placed the freshly penned note on the countertop, heart pounding. Would this gesture be an invitation or a burden? In that moment, the air felt suffocating with anticipation, every heartbeat echoing her uncertainty. The risk of rejection loomed heavy. Could her honesty shatter not just her dreams but the fragile connection she had forged with Tom? Before she could dwell further, she heard footsteps approaching. Tom was coming. She swallowed hard. The moment had arrived to stand exposed before him, to share her unmasked self. In the deepening silence, she became acutely aware of the choice before her and the inevitable confrontation it would spark. Could she bear the possibility of being misunderstood? With a newfound determination bolstered by her yearning for authenticity, she stood ready to face Tom and the transformative power her words contained, knowing that this exchange could shape both their futures. Tom's footsteps echoed softly as he approached, each one resonating with a sense of impending revelation. He paused just outside the kitchen doorway, the atmosphere thickening with unspoken emotions. Sarah clenched her fists, grounding herself in the moment. This was no longer just about her words. It was about inviting him into the depths of her reality, a risky plunge into vulnerability. As he stepped inside, his expression shifted. There was an unmistakable spark of curiosity behind his guarded eyes. The moment stretched uncomfortably, and she felt the pulse of uncertainty quicken in her chest. "Sarah," he started, taking a step closer. "I wanted to talk about what you wrote." Her breath caught. Had he truly read her words? Each line was an unfiltered reflection of herself, and now she had to confront the uneasy truth that maybe, just maybe, he had truly grasped her tumult. I hope they didn't offend you," she stammered, fighting the urge to retract her vulnerability. They didn't offend me," Tom interrupted, his voice steady and filled with a newfound sincerity. "They moved me. Your honesty, it's refreshing." His compliment landed with the weight of a feather and a stone, simultaneously light enough to lift her spirits but heavy enough to add to the gravity of the moment. Sarah battled a surge of emotions, pride danced with fear, and gratitude collided with doubt. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I worry that I might have overstepped my boundaries. You've shared so much of your experiences, and Sarah, you deserve to share just as much. Your story matters. I want to know more." The sincerity in his gaze ignited something deep inside her. She felt the barriers she had built over years of self-doubt beginning to crack under the weight of his encouragement. Yet, the specter of her own fears loomed large, threatening to overshadow this moment of connection. What if you think I'm arrogant for drawing parallels? She blurted out, unable to suppress her insecurities. What if my dreams seem insignificant to you? Tom stepped closer, closing the physical and emotional distance that had felt insurmountable just moments before. Every journey is significant, Sarah. It shapes us into who we are. You've experienced challenges that deserve recognition fair and square. His words wrapped around her like a warm cloak, erasing the chill of her doubts. It was a revelation. There was a space for her voice, one that could coexist with his, a partnership rather than a competition. I want to share more, she admitted, the confession flowing unbidden from her heart. I've held back for so long, but she hesitated, but I want to contribute to this connection we've built. Acknowledging her desire fueled a sense of clarity, igniting an inner drive she had thought extinguished. Sarah realized that engaging with Tom required her not just to perceive him but to embrace her own voice as an equal player in their dialogue. Tom studied her intently, as if sensing the pivotal shift within her. Then let us do it together. Write more, share your dreams, and help me understand how you see the world. I want to learn from you. As those words emerged, something inside her clicked. It was both liberating and terrifying. The realization struck. This was not merely a matter of sharing thoughts but unraveling the fortified layers of her identity. Each word she would put to paper carried the potential to reshape her reality and their relationship. Determined, Sarah nodded, her pulse steadying. I will. I'm ready to embrace my story. But just as soon as a sense of resolution seeped in, another thought punctured the air. What if Tom's desire to understand her led him to a darker inquiry, one about the reasons she had hidden in the shadows for so long? Would he interrogate her past, or would he seek answers that she herself was unsure of? As they exchanged a tentative smile, the air hummed with possibilities, both exhilarating and daunting. In that intimacy lay the potential for profound discovery, but would it lead her to liberation or force her to confront the skeletons lurking in the recesses of her heart? The prospect of sharing more than just dreams kindled a spark of uncertainty. She was on the cusp of a transformation, and the next conversation loomed heavy with both hope and apprehension. Are you certain you're ready for that? She finally asked, voice barely above a whisper, the weight of her past pressing down on her. Before their exchange could continue, a sudden noise reverberated through the mansion, shattering their moment of connection and leaving the promise of their journey hanging in the balance. The mansion felt alive, and so did Sarah's resolve. The path ahead would demand everything she had: courage, honesty, and the relentless pursuit of her identity. With her heart racing, she prepared for what lay ahead, knowing that now was the time to unearth every fragment of her story. And what would Tom do next? Would he be the catalyst for her revelation, or the one who drew out the shadows she had tried so hard to bury? Sarah's heart thumped loudly in her chest as the echo of the noise faded, leaving a daunting silence hanging between them. She felt every muscle in her body tense, caught between the thrill of possible connection with Tom and the shadow of her fears creeping back in. That moment of vulnerability she had dared to share now felt fragile, teetering on the edge of revelation and confrontation. Let us get back to that, shall we? Tom said, his tone shifting from warmth to a brisk, focused determination. What you wrote, it's about your journey. I want to understand, but I can't do that without you leading me through it. Sarah steadied herself against the kitchen counter, seeking the solidity of the granite as if it could provide her with the strength she desperately needed. Standing before Tom, she felt the gravity of his expectations. Here was a man who sought not just her words but her essence. Would she be capable of fulfilling that demand? Every story has its turns, Tom, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Mine has a few bends you may not expect. Tom regarded her closely, a mixture of curiosity and empathy swirling in his eyes. I'm here for it. Every twist and turn. That's how we learn. His words stirred something deep within her, igniting a flicker of bravery she hadn't nurtured in years. The memory of scribbling her thoughts in the early morning hours came flooding back, the ink barely drying before she tucked those pages away, ashamed of her admissions. But here was Tom, a counterpart willing to share the weight and illuminate the darkness she had feared. The battle within her raged, Were her experiences worthy enough to invite someone into her chaotic world? Okay, she breathed out, loosening her fists. Where do we start? Tom leaned against the counter, creating a shared space that bridged the invisible divide that had kept them apart for so long. Start with how you felt when you first sat down to write. What pushed you to put pen to paper? Sarah hesitated, grappling with the power of honesty. Fear, she admitted slowly, each word deliberate. Fear that I'd never be enough. That no one would understand. And yet relief washed over me when I wrote. It was cathartic. Tom nodded, his gaze unyielding. That sounds like a breakthrough. What do you think kept you from sharing that truth until now? A shiver of realization coursed through her. This wasn't just a conversation about her writings, this was an exploration of her own limitations. I've always kept my story in the shadows, she confessed, afraid of judgment, of appearing vulnerable. Everyone expects a flawless narrative. I thought sharing my fears would weaken me. On the contrary, Tom replied, leaning closer. It takes courage to be honest about our flaws. That's what makes us real. His words washed over her, softening the hardened layers she had built to protect herself. She had spent so long fearing the reaction of others that she had neglected the freedom in authenticity. Then maybe it's time to confront those shadows. The words fell from her lips with newfound clarity, a decision that felt monumental, as if she were finally peeling away layers of her past to create something meaningful. Absolutely. But remember, I may probe deeper. Not to pry, but to understand. Are you ready for that? The weight of his question loomed, igniting her anxiety and excitement simultaneously. Confronting her past meant embracing the reality she had tucked away, the memories stacked like dust-laden boxes in her mind. I am ready, she affirmed, and for the first time, those words felt solid to her. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. That we maintain this balance. I will share if you listen, but I want it to be a dialogue, not an interrogation. Her eyes sparkled with determination that he smiled, a genuine warmth blossoming in response. Agreed. I'm here not to judge but to learn, to grow alongside you. The unspoken promise hung between them, a thread that began to weave together their separate narratives. But as Sarah prepared for the dive, a sense of dread began to swirl in her gut. What if those shadows were darker than she had anticipated? A flicker of doubt surfaced, but she squashed it down. This was her chance, a moment to embrace her identity, to redefine herself through her own narrative. As they settled into their discussion, a wary anticipation crackled in the air. The path ahead was uncharted, filled with the unknown. Let us continue, Sarah suggested, her voice welcoming yet edged with uncertainty. But an unease lurked beneath the surface. What if the shadows she needed to confront called for more than just a personal exploration? What if they unleashed questions she wasn't ready to answer? With Tom attentive beside her, the stage was set for a transformative journey. A wave of resolve washed over her, but the lingering dread remained. What secrets might unravel as she peeled back the layers? As they delved into the depths of their exchange, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were both standing on the precipice of something profound and perhaps perilous. What would they uncover as they ventured deeper into her story, and what consequences awaited in the shadows? Sarah felt a tremor of anticipation as she prepared to share more of her story. Each breath she took echoed in her mind, reinforcing her decision to step into the light of vulnerability. Her past had been a shadowy realm, full of burdens she carried in silence. But speaking the unspoken required not just courage, it required a willingness to confront who she had been and who she might become. Let us go back to the beginning, she suggested, her voice steadier now, an earnest determination brimming within her. When I was a child, writing felt like a safe haven. It was this private escape, an unguarded sanctuary where I could be utterly honest. Tom leaned in, his attentiveness unyielding. What do you mean by unguarded? The pages didn't judge me, she revealed, a soft vulnerability creeping into her tone. They absorbed my fears, my insecurities. I could share my wildest dreams and darkest thoughts without fear of the world reacting. And at what point did that shift? Tom asked gently, his eyes encouraging her to probe deeper. Sarah swallowed hard, the act pulling up memories she hadn't revisited in years. As I grew older, I began to feel the weight of expectations, family, friends, society. I thought I had to present a narrative that was polished, compelling, irrefutable. Being perfect became a shield, and writing turned into just another way to hide. What would happen if you let go of that need for perfection? He inquired, allowing a moment of silence to stretch between them, instilling a contemplative atmosphere. It would mean exposing my truest self, she admitted, the thought sending chills down her spine. I think it terrifies me. What if who I am isn't enough? Tom nodded, recognizing her vulnerability. But what if that is the exact point of connection for others? What if your flaws, your fears, and your journey are precisely what people connect with? His question hung in the air, heavy yet grounding, forcing Sarah's mind to race. What if? She murmured, her contemplative tone undercutting the resolution she tried to embody. The prospect of authenticity unlocked something buried deep within her, a glimmer of hope coupled with lingering anxiety. As Tom continued to listen, she felt as though they were in a space where time slowed down. Each word exchanged felt like a gentle unraveling, a strip down to her core. I wrote about losing my mother, about the vulnerability encapsulated in her absence. That was my lowest point, she revealed. I wrote for her, but I also wrote out of despair. I was afraid to share that grief, afraid to invite others into that pain. Grief is a universal experience, Tom affirmed, his voice a comforting anchor. You should never feel ashamed of expressing it. What if that pain is part of the healing process both for you and those around you? His perspective rattled something within her, shifting the dynamics of her thinking. Being outspoken about my pain feels like baring my soul, it makes me feel exposed, she said, the tremor in her voice betraying her inner turmoil. But Tom's energy was infectious, feeding off her struggle and fueling her resolve. Maybe that's where true connection begins, he urged. Your story can remind others they are not alone. It's not about perfection, it's about truth. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, letting his words wash over her. Could she really embrace the truth of her experiences? The courage she needed felt scarily vast, and yet it flickered like a distant light guiding her forward. Okay, she nodded resolutely, feeling a new path begin to emerge before her. I want to dig deeper into that loss. Tom smiled, and in that moment, she felt a bond solidifying, a thread of shared intent tethered them amid the darkness she had long lived in. However, with each revelation, a quaint question skittered through her mind: what if confronting her losses unearthed emotions and memories she wasn't ready to face? A cold wave of uncertainty mixed with determination rippled through her as they set off down this deepening exploration. Could she embrace not just the shadows but the possibility of understanding them? Let us journey into that, she decided, gripping onto the burgeoning clarity that defined this moment. The fear still lingered, a constant murmur cleverly masked beneath ache and hope. But just as they began to explore the next rung of her journey, she wrestled with an unsettling thought: what if this openness invited emotional chaos more daunting than her own troubled past? The stakes were growing high, the horizon ahead marred by unknown complexities. But this willingness to navigate the maze of her emotional history was a declaration of intent. What deeper fears awaited her as they bravely ventured forward? Sarah took a deep breath, the weight of her intention pressing against her diaphragm like a heavy stone. She yearned to understand the full extent of her emotions, the way they swirled within her like an uncharted ocean. What lay beneath the surface remained a turbulent mystery. I want to start with the day she left, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. When my mother passed away, I felt a part of me go with her. The void she left behind was more than just absence, it was suffocating. I stopped writing as if the act itself was inappropriate without her to read it. Tom's gaze was steady, a lighthouse in the creeping fog of her memories. What do you remember about your last moments with her? The image flooded back, vivid and sharp. "I remember her smile," Sarah whispered, her heart pounding. "I remember the way she held my hand, how she would always whisper, 'Be brave, darling.' I never truly understood what that meant until now." As those words escaped her lips, she felt waves of sorrow crashing against the shore of her resolve. She could almost hear her mother's voice echoing in the recesses of her mind, demanding her to push through to confront the unanswered questions that had festered in silence for far too long. "What does bravery look like for you now?" Tom asked, guiding her deeper into the introspection. "Bravery," she repeated, testing the weight of the word, "means facing the stories that make me uncomfortable. It means sharing not just the triumphs, but also the agonizing losses. It's about owning those truths, however painful." A flicker of understanding crossed Tom's face. "And in that vulnerability, you may find liberation not just for yourself, but for others who are longing for honesty." Suddenly, something clicked inside her, a revelation that felt almost electric. Her voice grew stronger as she continued, "I want to write again, not just for myself, but for anyone holding their breath under the weight of grief. I've always believed that writing must be polished, but I realize it's the rawness, the unfiltered truth that breathes life into words." The corners of Tom's mouth turned up, reflecting the light kindled within her. "That's a significant shift. What is stopping you now?" "Fear," she admitted, her brow furrowing slightly. "Fear of judgment. Fear that my words won't resonate. Fear of unraveling too much at once. But I can't let that define me anymore." A moment of hesitation struck her. What if opening the floodgates invited turmoil back into her life? Striking a balance between vulnerability and chaos seemed nearly impossible. Yet, the thought of sealing those pages away once more felt suffocating, a fate she sought desperately to avoid. As if reading her mind, Tom offered, "The chaos is part of the journey, Sarah. What you're embarking on now is an exploration. It's not about conquering the chaos, it's about understanding it. You are more resilient than you give yourself credit for." With his affirmation close, Sarah felt her resolve solidifying. What had once seemed daunting now began to pulse with possibility. "I will start small," she decided, her tone gaining authority. "Journaling, perhaps. Writing letters to her, telling her everything I wish I could share. Documenting my journey. It feels like a way to carve out a space where I can be completely honest." "And what is your ultimate goal for this honesty?" Tom pressed, his voice soft yet insistent. "To heal," she responded, her voice dropping to a whisper. "To reclaim the joy in writing, to transform the grief into something meaningful. I want to wield words like a weapon. No longer will I be shackled by my fears. I want to empower others to connect and resonate with their own pain." As she envisioned herself embracing this new commitment, a surge of excitement intertwined with her anxiety. But, as she sought to solidify her plan, an unsettling thought weighed heavily on her mind. What if her writing unearthed emotions she didn't know how to confront? But perhaps that discomfort was the very essence of her journey. Stepping forward into vulnerability could lead to profound connection, or it could plunge her into depths of despair and dread. Either way, the moment of truth loomed, a pivotal entry point into her discovery. What awaited her in this ambitious endeavor? With her fingers brushing against the empty pages of a notebook that lay before her, she wrestled with the question that would guide her next steps. Would she truly be prepared to face the dark shadows of her past to find light again? The notebook sat there like a silent sentinel, waiting for Sarah to take the first plunge. The anticipation twisted within her, an amalgamation of excitement and dread. She closed her eyes, envisioning a time when words flowed effortlessly from her fingers, when each thought transformed into a universe of possibilities. That moment now felt distant, overshadowed by the gnawing fear of revealing her vulnerability. Opening her eyes, she picked up a pen, its weight grounding. What if the act of writing could conjure feelings that threatened to overwhelm her? As she wrestled with that thought, the ink-tipped instrument pressed itself against the lined paper, poised yet reluctant. With a shaky breath, she began. The pen skated across the surface, leaving behind hesitant strokes that barely resembled coherent sentences. Before long, stray thoughts entangled her original intent. In her mind, doubts presented themselves like persistent intruders. Would the truth of her mother's absence become too much to shoulder? Would the words alienate her, or worse, expose her to the ridicule she so fiercely feared? She halted, the ink blotting a small segment of the page. Glancing at Tom, who was watching with an encouraging nod, she fought the impulsive urge to put the pen down and abandon her endeavor. "This isn't enough," she mumbled, a frown creasing her forehead. "Why don't you start with one memory?" he suggested gently, grounding her swirling thoughts. "Just one that feels significant to you, no pressure." His suggestion resonated, allowing a flicker of clarity to break through her distress. She took a moment to reflect, recalling the day her mother had gifted her a worn-out journal, the pages frayed and full of possibilities. "It was my first diary," she recounted, her voice softening. "She always believed writing could help me process my thoughts. I never really understood why it was important until I lost her." With newfound conviction, Sarah jotted her recollections of that day, reliving the incandescent joy she felt when her mother first handed her the journal. As snippets echoed in her mind, she wrote rapidly, tracing memories she had blurred with time. This was cathartic, the ink bleeding not just words, but emotions, a release that felt as intoxicating as it was terrifying, but even as she chronicled those cherished moments, the undertow of grief surged back, reminding her anew of what she sought to escape. "It's exhausting," she voiced, a tremor slipping through. "Confronting these memories, acknowledging the pain. What if I can't handle it?" "Then you pause," Tom stated simply, his demeanor calm yet commanding, "and let the emotions settle. It's part of the process. You're not merely uncovering, you're also learning how to navigate and manage what comes next." His words, steady and unwavering, brought a flicker of resolve. Perhaps he was right, she hadn't merely been tasked with confronting her past but also with crafting a pathway through it. It was a journey, not merely an obligation to rip open wounds. Driven by this revelation, Sarah picked up the pen again. She no longer saw the notebook as an instrument of dread but as a vessel of transformation. This was not an act of recklessness, it was a chance to find her voice and reclaim her narrative. As the ink flowed, a montage of emotions began manifesting on the page, from the unyielding sorrow to fragile moments of lingering joy. With every word, she confronted her truths, pulling her fragmented past into the present. The pacing of her heart matched the pounding rhythm of her resolve, but with each stroke, reality beckoned her once more. Would sharing these truths diminish them? Would the rawness affect her relationships with those still present? And yet, the idea of silencing her voice again loomed larger than her fears. As the ink dried, Sarah felt an unshackling of sorts, a momentous step toward discovering the essence of who she was, who she could be. It was a beginning she feared but desperately needed. However, she knew that this was merely the threshold. What lay beyond? Would her words echo in the silence or resonate with others who shared similar grief? As she pondered this, a knock at the door interrupted her thoughts, pulling her back to the reality lurking outside her written revelations. The moment of truth arrived. Would she risk unveiling her process to another, sharing the very core of her psyche with the world waiting at the threshold? The weight of that choice hovered, pregnant with uncertainty, as Sarah squared her shoulders to meet whatever entered. The door creaked open, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was a moment suspended in time, as the familiar face of her old friend Rebecca peered into the room, weariness etched upon her features. Sarah felt an almost palpable shift in the air. The sanctuary she created with the pen in hand now felt vulnerable to the intrusion of reality. "Hey, I wasn't sure you'd be home," Rebecca said, her voice laced with an undertone of concern. "You okay?" The question hung between them. Inside, Sarah's emotions collided. Here was a person who had shared countless memories with her, yet here she was, on the cusp of sharing something profoundly personal, a journey of unearthing buried truths. How could she articulate the gravity of her recent exploration without sounding dramatic or burdening Rebecca with her struggle? "I'm working on something," Sarah replied, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. She hesitated, glancing at the notebook that lay open on the table, filled with inked confessions and fragmented emotions. Would revealing the contents make her feel stripped bare? Rebecca stepped further into the room, her eyes flicking to the pages glistening with ink. Writing? You've always had a talent for it. I remember how you used to pour your heart out in high school. Yeah, Sarah whispered, a hint of nostalgia joining the anxious tension. I'm trying to navigate some memories. It's harder than I thought it would be. Do you want to talk about it? Rebecca offered, her voice warm and inviting, yet laced with trepidation. Sarah visibly stiffened, the lure to open up juxtaposed against the fear of vulnerability increased the tension in her chest. I don't know if I can, she admitted, the weight of her insecurities loomed large. Hey, take your time, Rebecca assured her, stepping closer. You know I'm here for you, right? We all carry our burdens, it's okay to let them be seen sometimes. The invitation resonated within Sarah. Rebecca's reassurance dispelled some of her anxiety, allowing a thread of courage to weave through her thoughts. Maybe it was time to bridge the gap between her solitary burden and shared understanding that as Sarah glanced back at her notebook, she realized that the act of writing wasn't only about confronting her past but also about processing what it meant in the context of her relationships. She caught Rebecca's gaze and chose her next words carefully, uncertain but resolute. I think I'm afraid of how my writing might change things, how it might change how people see me. Rebecca met her gaze with empathy, her expression softening. Isn't that the risk with any art? To share our truth is to open a doorway, it's an act of love as much as it is an act of courage. Sarah considered this deeply. If art in this case, her writing was about connection, wasn't it worth the risk of judgment? Each word she penned could exhibit the multifaceted essence of her humanity. And amid the fear of rejection lay the potential for understanding, for rebuilding parts of herself that had long been clouded by grief. Do you think it's worth it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca smiled gently, a reassuring light in her eyes. Absolutely. If done right, your words can be a beacon for others navigating through their grief. You're not just uncovering your story, you might help someone else feel less alone. The thought clawed at Sarah's chest again, swelling with complexity. Could sharing her journey resonate beyond her own experience? She pressed her palms against the notebook's cover, grappling with the dichotomy of fear and inspiration. What if she found her voice in sharing truths that others needed to hear? Her heart quickened as she realized the gravity of acceptance was resting in her hands. Still, a layer of fear wrapped tight around her, reminding her that exposing her innermost thoughts was an irreversible act. Maybe I will share it, she said, her voice almost lost in determination. But how do I begin? Rebecca's smile widened at that. Start by accepting that it's okay to be scared. Authenticity resonates deeply. Just be honest, your voice is your power. As a spark ignited within her, Sarah's thoughts cascaded into a fiery determination. She pondered over the threshold she was about to cross and the clarity that awaited. But would the vulnerabilities she laid bare find acceptance from the very people she sought understanding from? The air thickened again. This crossroads loomed larger, its implications swirled around her. Sarah took a deep breath, ready to step into this new realm, uncertain yet emboldened. This is just the beginning, isn't it? She murmured, sensing a shift within herself as she leaned toward the notebook once more. Again, reality approached, looming on the horizon, and she knew the moment she penned those words, she would be irrevocably changed. However, she remained unaware of the looming challenge ahead that would test her resolve and the heart of her new journey. Would she stand resilient against the shadows of doubt, or would she find herself spiraling into them? The early morning sun peered through Sarah's curtains, splashing warm light across her notebook and illuminating the inked lines that held fragments of her soul. She blinked awake, her mind racing, filled with the remnants of yesterday's conversation with Rebecca. Each word had rekindled a flame of creativity, pushing her toward a precipice where the fear of vulnerability battled with a desperate need to be seen, invigorated, she swung her legs over the side of the bed, her feet hitting the cool floor with purpose. Today was a new chapter. Today, she would write not just for herself but for others who lingered in the shadows of their own stories. Last night had shown her that sharing her truth could bridge the gap of isolation and bind her with readers who felt lost. Much like herself, Sarah brewed a cup of coffee, the rich aroma curling through the air, mixing with the remnants of uncertainty. She imagined what it would be like to lay her words bare for the world, to weave her pain and healing into a narrative that spoke to the collective human experience. But beneath that exhilaration, a murmur of doubt crept in. What if her words weren't enough? What if they pushed people away instead of drawing them closer? She pulled out her notebook, watching as the daylight seeped into every crevice like an invitation to create. Flicking through the pages, she traced her fingers over the swirling letters, over thoughts that had felt too fragile to share. What would Rebecca say? She would encourage her, affirming that even the strongest storms had their purpose. Sarah took a deep breath, letting that thought settle within her. The essence of her story was about weathering those storms and emerging on the other side with newfound clarity. She began writing, not by structuring a grand narrative, but by jotting down moments: the quiet heartbreak after a lingering goodbye, the laughter shared with friends that temporarily pushed the pain away, the late-night fears that left her wide awake. It was cathartic. With each stroke of the pen, her trepidation began to unravel. What started as an internal battle began transforming into a solidified narrative. Her narrative. As the hours melted away, she felt a warmth spreading through her. This wasn't merely an act of confession, it was empowering. Every sentence became a stepping stone into her past while also illuminating the rich territory of her future. She found herself on the cusp of a poignant realization: sharing her story didn't diminish her, it amplified her. The act of unveiling her truth could inspire others, providing them solace amid their struggles, but with the growing empowerment came shadows trailing at her heels. Could she sustain this momentum? Would her writing hold enough weight to resonate, or would it falter when exposed to the scrutiny of others? Just as these thoughts began to spiral, her phone buzzed, Rebecca's name flashing on the screen. "Hey. Just checking in. How's it going?" A rush of energy surged through Sarah. Rebecca was her anchor, her sounding board. To share not only her creative process but also her burgeoning fears felt like a necessary step. "It's going," she replied, her voice stirring with vulnerability. "It's hard, Rebecca. I'm excited but terrified." "That's totally normal," Rebecca reassured her through the phone, her voice bridging the gap between fear and motivation. "Think back to why you started this. Remember your purpose. You're not just writing, you're diving deep to bring something meaningful to life. A lot of people could benefit from your honesty." As she absorbed her friend's words, an unexpected thought seared through her consciousness: could she let this gratitude fuel her journey? What if, rather than just chronicling her experiences, she annotated her lessons? What if she transformed each memory into a revelation that could guide her readers? "Thank you," Sarah breathed out, a flicker of resolve igniting her. There it was, the promise of clarity within her tumultuous mind. "We'll get through this together, okay? Just keep writing," Rebecca encouraged. Before disconnecting, leaving Sarah with a strengthened purpose. Her fingers hovered over the page, contemplating the profound journey upon which she had embarked. But what awaited her at the other end? How would she navigate the unpredictability of revealing her vulnerabilities? Her thoughts swirled with excitement and anxiety, yet one question lingered beneath the surface: was she truly prepared to face the reactions of the world if her words fell short of their potential? With renewed determination, she resumed writing. The stakes were rising, and the tipping point lingered at the horizon, tantalizingly close yet uncertain. Would her authenticity draw the audience in, or would it send them fleeing from the depths of her unresolved pain? The ink flowed, but so did the questions that lingered like shadows. Days turned into weeks as Sarah continued to pour her heart onto the pages of her notebook. The sunlight illuminated her words, offering warmth and clarity, an invitation to confront her past. Each morning empowered her, fueling her resolve to weave her experiences into a cohesive narrative. The once fragile moments of vulnerability now transformed into a tapestry of resilience. Sarah had begun to heal as she embraced the weight of her story, intertwining grief and hope. However, the lingering fear of external judgment still hovered in the corners of her mind. What if her truth alienated those she cared about? But with her burgeoning identity came unwavering determination. Sarah recognized that the act of writing itself was not only liberating but also a responsibility she bore for herself and, potentially, for others who had walked similar paths. One fateful afternoon, Sarah decided it was time to take the plunge. After sharing her progress with Tom, their conversations deepening into explorations of her narrative, she was met with supportive encouragement. Tom's willingness to listen affirmed her growing confidence, and their partnership had forged a mutual understanding rooted in authenticity. Obliterating the carefully constructed barriers she'd maintained for most of her life became an exhilarating process. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting hues of orange and gold through her window, Sarah opened her laptop. The blank screen glared back at her like a pulsing promise. She began crafting an article encapsulating her journey, how confronting her memories had unearthed both pain and power. She emphasized the importance of vulnerability as a catalyst for profound connection. After hours of intense focus, Sarah leaned back, surveying her narrative. It was raw, honest, and a testament to her journey. As she prepared to hit send for publication, her heart raced. Would others recognize the depth of her feelings? The words trembled before her, yet they encapsulated the essence of her transformation. She pressed send and closed her eyes, a significant weight lifting off her shoulders. The response to her article flooded in, warm and overwhelming. Readers reveled in her honesty, offering support that eclipsed her fears and apprehensions. Messages poured in from those who resonated with her struggles, stories mirrored across the void of shared humanity. What had once been a solitary endeavor morphed into something much larger, wrapping her in a communal embrace that obliterated her initial dread. Sarah's newfound voice and perspective propelled her into pursuing greater ambitions. She began preparing for speaking engagements at local schools, eager to share her journey of transformation and empowerment through writing. Her once numb fears and self-doubt now served as a backdrop to a narrative filled with purpose and recognition, a story that could inspire and encourage others to embrace their vulnerabilities. Tom watched with pride as she flourished, admiring her boldness and unwavering commitment to authenticity. Their relationship deepened further as they navigated their respective transformations, Tom connecting with his daughter and reclaiming relationships he had once shunned due to his past. And so it was, in moments vast with shared joys and challenges, Sarah emerged not only as a writer but as a confident woman willing to bear her truth to foster connections. She had reached a state where her achievements lay not in accolades but in the whispers of honesty that echoed through every story she shared. Standing in front of a group of eager young faces during a speaking engagement, Sarah experienced a rush of joy and fulfillment. "I urge you to accept your vulnerabilities," she spoke passionately to the audience. "Each of you holds the power to turn your pain into purpose, to weave your narratives into a tapestry of connection. Embrace who you are and share that self with the world." The applause that erupted felt more like a resonating affirmation than mere recognition. It was a reinforcement of her journey and overwhelming embrace of acceptance. In that moment, Sarah understood that she had indeed conquered her fears, had allowed herself to be vulnerable, and transformed her scars into a source of strength. No longer a cleaning lady hidden within the shadows, she blossomed into a voice that resonated, igniting hope in others while affirming her own worth. This was her time, and in the fading light of the day, she felt a surge of genuine confidence, finally knowing that she had become a fierce architect of her narrative, proving that through courage and connection, anything was possible. Now, if you found inspiration in Sarah's journey, you need to subscribe now to keep up with more exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support and join a community that celebrates personal transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support stories like Sarah's. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. The power of storytelling is in our hands. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Sarah's growth, because every voice matters.